Senator from Vermont.
President, I rise in strong opposition to the nomination of Congressman Tom Price to be the next Secretary of Health and Human Services. And my opposition to Congressman Price has less to do with his well-known extreme right-wing economic views than it has to do with the hypocrisy and dishonesty of President Trump. The simple truth is that Congressman Price's record is the exact opposite of what President Trump promised to working families and to senior citizens all over this country. Now, if President Trump had run his campaign for president by saying, okay, Americans, I'm going to cut Social Security, and I'm going to cut Medicare, and I'm going to cut Medicaid, and I'm going to put together a cabinet that will do just that, I think Congressman Price would have been the perfect candidate for Secretary of HHS. But that is not the kind of campaign that Donald Trump ran. He ran a campaign in which he said over and over again, I am a different type of Republican. I am not going to cut Social Security. I am not going to cut Medicare, and I'm not going to cut Medicaid. And yet he has nominated individuals like Congressman Price, who have spent their entire career doing the exact opposite of what Donald Trump promised the American people he would not do. If Mr. Trump had said, and I quote, I want to prevent the American people from getting low-cost prescription drugs from Canada, and I want to continue to prohibit Medicare from negotiating for lower drug prices, Congressman Price would have been a great choice. But, Mr. President, that is not what Donald Trump said during his campaign. This is what President Trump said during the campaign. On May 7, 2015, Mr. Trump tweeted, quote, I was the first and only potential GOP candidate to state there will be no cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. End of quote. On August 10, 2015, Mr. Trump said, quote, I will save Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security without cuts. Without cuts. We have to do it. People have been paying in for years, and now many of these candidates want to cut it. End of quote. On November 3rd, 2015, Mr. Trump said, quote, I'll save Social Security. I will save Medicare. People love Medicare. I'm not going to cut it. End of quote. On May 21st, 2015, Mr. Trump tweeted, quote, I am going to save Social Security without any cuts. I know where to get the money from. Nobody else does. End of quote. On January 24th, 2015, Mr. Trump said, quote, I'm not a cutter. I'll probably be the only Republican that doesn't want to cut Social Security. End of quote. Now, Mr. Trump did not make these statements in the middle of the night. It wasn't an ambush interview with some reporter who caught him off guard. This was one of the centerpieces of his campaign for president. And I think whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent or whatever you are, you will acknowledge that Mr. Trump said, I am not a conventional Republican. I'm going to do it differently. Everybody else, all the Republicans, they want to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and he's absolutely right. They do. But he made a promise to the American people that he would be different, that he would not cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Now, President Trump sends out tweets every single day But the American people are still waiting for that one tweet which says, I will keep my promise. I will not cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And if Republicans give me legislation to do that, I will veto that legislation. And in fact, the president could save us all a whole lot of time if he would get on the phone now, the Republicans in the House and some here in the Senate, and say, hey, save your efforts. Don't waste your time. Because if you bring me legislation that will cut Social Security, cut Medicare, cut Medicaid, I am going to veto it. And if President Trump sent that tweet, it would save us all a whole lot of time. But more importantly, it would tell millions of seniors who today cannot make it on $13,000, $14,000, $15,000 a year in Social Security that he will not make their lives more difficult. He will tell seniors who are struggling with difficult, painful, costly illnesses that he's not going to devastate Medicare. He will tell low-income people who are trying to survive on minimum incomes that he will not take away the health insurance they have through Medicaid. And he will tell middle-class families and working-class families that no, they do not have to worry, that their parents can remain in nursing homes and have those bills paid by Medicaid. But what I think the American people are worried about is not just that Mr. Trump has not yet sent out that tweet. We did get a tweet about Arnold Schwarzenegger and how well he is doing on his TV show. We got several tweets regarding that. But we did not get the tweet that tells seniors and working people that they do not have to worry about their future, that this president was not lying, but was telling the truth when he said he will not cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Problem is that he has nominated people like Congressman Price, whose views are absolutely contradictory to what President Trump campaigned on. So why do you appoint somebody whose views run exactly opposite to what you told the American people during your campaign? The truth is that in the House of Representatives, Congressman Price has led the effort to end Medicare as we know it by giving seniors inadequate vouchers to purchase private health insurance. In 2009, Congressman Price said, and I quote, and I hope people listen to this quote and try to ask yourselves, how could somebody who ran on a campaign of not cutting Medicare appoint this gentleman to be Secretary of Health and Human Services? This is what Congressman Price said, quote, nothing has had a greater negative effect on the delivery of health care than the federal government's intrusion into medicine through Medicare. We will not rest until we make certain that government-run health care is ended, end of quote. Now, how does that tally with candidate Donald Trump saying, I will not cut Medicare and Medicaid? Mr. President, we don't need an HHS secretary who will end Medicare as we know it. We need an HHS secretary who will protect and expand Medicare. Mr. President, the idea of this voucher program, of ending Medicare as we know it, as a defined benefit plan, and converting it into a voucher plan, not only contradicts what candidate Donald Trump said, but it will be a disaster for millions of seniors. Right now, if you are a senior and you are diagnosed with a serious and costly illness, you have the comfort of knowing that Medicare will be there throughout your illness. It will pay your bills. The Republican plan, led by Congressman Paul Ryan, has a very different approach. And what that plan is about is a voucher plan which says that we will end Medicare as we know it. We will give seniors a voucher of an undetermined amount. Last number I heard was $8,000, may go up, maybe lower, and give that check to a senior who then goes out into the private insurance market looking for the best policy that he or she can get. I would like the American people to think for a moment what kind of policy an 80-year-old person can get who is struggling with cancer and who has a check for $8,000. And the answer is, when you go into a private insurance company, and also if the Republicans are successful in doing away with the Affordable Care Act and the patient protections within the Affordable Care Act, including a ban on insurance companies' ability not to insure you if you have a pre-existing condition. Now, let's assume they get rid of that. Now, you're 80 years old, you walk into an insurance company, and you say, I've been diagnosed with cancer, and here's my check for $8,000. And the insurance agent looks at you and says, are you kidding? Don't be absurd. Why would we cover you? What do you think we are going to give you for $8,000 when you're about to run up some enormous health care costs relating to cancer? You're going to be in the hospital. You're going to undergo all kinds of treatments. You're going to need expensive drugs, and you expect us to take you with an $8,000 check. How are we going to make any money out of you? Because that's what our job is. We're an insurance company. We don't care about health care. We care about making money. That's our function. We don't make money on $8,000 taking care of somebody who's 80 years of age who has cancer. Furthermore, because the Republicans got rid of the law protecting people who have pre-existing conditions, we don't even have to take you. Or maybe we will take you. But you're going to have to add another $10,000 on top of that $8,000 because that's the only way we make money. And that is what the voucher plan on Medicare. Oh, by the way, also, so there's no confusion, they want to raise the retirement age to make sure you keep working to 67 years of age. So not only is that a disaster, but maybe in a deeper sense, if we take democracy seriously, if we think candidates should run for office based on what they really believe, all of that stuff is a direct contradiction to what candidate Donald Trump talked about. And I have heard many Republicans say, look, what he was talking about was really absurd. It was ridiculous. Of course, we're not going to do that. Well, then that takes us to a whole other discussion, is what does it mean if you have a candidate who runs for office who simply lies to the American people, who really doesn't mean anything he said? Now, I have no problems getting up and debating or disagreeing with my colleagues who have a very conservative point of view. That is their point of view. This is a democracy, and we have different perspectives. And many of those candidates ran on positions. They were honest enough to say, hey, you elect me, I think we got to cut Social Security. And they gave their reasons. Think we got to cut Medicare. They gave their reasons. Think we got to cut Medicaid. They gave their reasons. We think we got to give huge tax breaks to billionaires. They gave their reasons. Well, for some reason or another, the people in their state elected them. That's fine. It's called democracy. But that is not what Donald Trump did as a candidate. So I rise in opposition to Congressman Price becoming Secretary of HHS because his appointment would go in diametrical opposition to what candidate Donald Trump told the American people. And I think that's a bad thing for democracy. If You run for office, keep your word, Do what you told the American people you would do. The profound disgust that so many millions of people feel for the American political process is not just what we believe, it's that we don't keep the words, the promises that we make them. And this is exactly where Donald Trump is today. Let me touch on some other areas where I think President Trump has not been clear with the American people. And that is, we pay today, by far, the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. 1 out of 5 Americans between 18 and 65 cannot afford to fill the prescriptions that their doctors write to them. The numbers go down after 65 because of Medicare Part D. But can you imagine living in a nation where 1 out of 5 people cannot afford to fill the prescriptions their doctors write? Now, Mr. Trump campaigned on taking on the pharmaceutical industry. Well, the record of Congressman Price is very different than the rhetoric that candidate Donald Trump used during his campaign. So I eagerly await Mr. Trump's statement. He can do it through a tweet, that would be fine with me, that says that he will support legislation, concrete legislation, that some of us are going to be offering very, very shortly, which does 2 fundamental things that will substantially lower prescription drug costs in America today. Number 1, at a time when you can buy many medicines for far less cost in Canada or in many other countries around the world, at a time when we have free trade agreements so that the lettuce and the tomatoes you're having for dinner could come from Mexico, Latin America, or any place all over the world. Fish you eat can come from any place all over the world. We will introduce legislation that says that individuals, pharmacists, prescription drug distributors will be able to purchase lower-cost medicine in Canada and eventually in other countries around the world. Now, President Trump had talked in his campaign about taking on the pharmaceutical industry. I hope very much that he will at least keep his word on that issue, and he will join us in supporting legislation to allow for the reimportation of brand-name prescription drugs from Canada and many other countries around the world. And if he is prepared to do that, we will pass it. We will pass it because there are a number of Republicans who support it, and the vast majority of Democrats support it. We have the votes to pass it. And if President Trump signs that bill, we will go a long way in ending the burden that so many elderly people and working people and people with chronic illnesses are facing today, and that is the outrageously high cost of prescription drugs. And by the way, this high cost, these huge increases in prescription drug costs take place at a time when in 2015, the largest 5 pharmaceutical companies in this country made $50 billion in profit. $50 billion in profit in 2015, and yet 1 out of 5 Americans under 65 cannot afford the medicine they need. The top 10 CEOs or executives in the pharmaceutical industry during that year made over $300 million in salary. So, passing reimportation is one mechanism to lower the cost of prescription drugs, but it is not the only one. We have a totally insane prescription drug pricing system in America right now. So if you are Kaiser Permanente, you will pay a certain amount for a drug. And by the way, of course, we don't know what that amount is that you're paying. That's secret. If you are Medicare, you will pay a different amount. If you are the Veterans Administration, you will pay a different amount than Medicare. And if you're Medicaid, you will pay a different amount than Medicare or the Veterans Administration. And we have a situation today where, by law, Veterans Administration is able to negotiate drug prices with the pharmaceutical industry. Today, we have a situation where Medicaid, by law, is guaranteed a significant rebate over list prices. But in terms of Medicare, which spends over $4 billion a year for prescription drugs, Republicans a number of years ago insisted that Medicare would not be able to negotiate drug prices with the pharmaceutical industry. Now, President Trump has indicated in vague language that perhaps he would support the ability of Medicare to negotiate prices with the pharmaceutical industry. Given all of the tweets that he has sent out on so many subjects, I would hope that he has the time to send out a very simple tweet which says that if Congress passes legislation allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices with the pharmaceutical industry, I will sign that bill. And that tweet will have a profound impact, A, on taxpayers, because we can save very substantial sums of money, and it will also result in lowering the cost of prescription drugs. Now, unfortunately, once again, Congressman Price is coming from a different place than candidate Trump came from. And again, that contradiction of a president appointing somebody whose views are diametrically opposed to the views he raised during the campaign. Mr. President, the American people, I think, are growing increasingly concerned about the contradictions in general, not just in health care, of what candidate Trump said and what President Trump is doing. Now, during the course of his campaign, not only did candidate Trump say that he would not cut Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid, he also said that he thought that Wall Street was causing all kinds of problems and that you can't clean the swamp up by bringing people who are part of the swamp, in so many words, is what he said. You can't bring people in to clean up the problem who have caused the problem in the first place. And you know what? He is exactly right. He is exactly right. You can't bring in people whose greed and recklessness and illegal behavior on Wall Street caused us the worst economic downturn in the modern history of this country. You can't bring those people in and then say, we're going to solve the problems that Wall Street causes. But in an exactly similar way to what he has done with the Secretary of Health and Human Services, he is bringing in top Wall Street executives. His main financial advisor comes from Goldman Sachs, one of the largest financial institutions in this country, a financial institution that required a multi-billion-dollar bailout from the taxpayers, an institution whose illegal behavior caused them to have to pay a $5 billion fine to the federal government. Those are the people he is bringing in to regulate, to take on Wall Street. He is bringing in Wall Street executives who caused the worst financial crisis in the modern history of this country to take on Wall Street. Well, I don't think most Americans believe that. So, Mr. President, let me close by saying that I would hope that tonight that the United States Senate stands up for the American people, demands that President Trump keeps the campaign promises that he makes, and that we reject the nomination of Congressman Price to be the next Secretary of Health and Human Services. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.